Hello and assalamu alaikum everyone. So let's move on to the final lecture of this chapter. Now we've talked about everything. We've talked about published accounts. We talked about the contents of published account. We talked about income statement. We talked about statement of financial position. We talked about ratio analysis. We talked about improving that and limitations of ratio analysis, and we also talked about the uses of published accounts to stakeholders. Now there's one last thing remaining, that is the limitations of published accounts. So before moving on to limitations, let's just recap what published accounts were. These were the financial records. These were the financial records of the business transactions that provides essential information to groups within and externally to a business. So internal managers, staff, employees, shareholders, banks, etc. We saw how all these stakeholders use this information. It gives information on profitability, the value of fixed assets, liquidity, and growth investment potential. Interested stakeholders may use accounts and examine performance indicators such as net profit margin, level of sales, long-term liabilities, etc. These provide indicators of these provide indication of performance and financial stability or strength. More than 1 year's account may be examined for further information. And while of potential value to an interested stakeholder, published accounts have limitations. So we already talked about that. Okay, all of this is previous stuff. Nothing new. We've talked about the uses. We've talked about how it could be useful. So now let's look at those limitations. So basically, it contains only information required by law. So of course, businesses, they are not very happy with publishing their accounts, but they have to, because it's a requirement by law, so that your potential shareholders, your investors can see if the business is worth investing in or not. So that's the main reason why government wants businesses to publish their accounts. So but still businesses don't want to tell they want to they try to disclose as little information as possible, hence not providing additional data to provide a better picture of the business. Generally they try to hide future projects, etc., because they don't want to provide as much information to the competitors, so that the competitors don't have a hand above them. It also does not reveal the performance of individual parts of the business, so that's why you can't assess where how each particular division of a business is doing as compared to the overall business performance. How much is particular division how is each division how is each division contributing towards the overall performance of the business. So that information is not provided over here. One of the biggest limitation is that it is historic information. What has happened in the past may not define the current situation. We've already talked about the historical idea in limitation of ratios as well. So it's just a recap kind of, so that the assumption underpinning making decisions on the business on the basis of analyzing financial statements is that the future will be same as the past. Of course, clearly this is not always the case. Other external factors such as the change in technology, change in consumer preferences, or influx of competitors can lead to historical financial information proving to be an inaccurate indicator of financial performance. So of course, it is not always the case that what happened before is going to repeat itself. Okay, generally it takes time to publish these accounts, so in the span of 3 months of only, the business landscape must have changed in some way. Perhaps there's some influx of competitors, perhaps your competitor has launched a new competitive product, because of which you have to reduce the prices, and there are lots of stuff that can happen, because of which it does not indicate the current situation of the business. It is historic information. It tells you about the past, it doesn't tell you the present situation of the business. So that's one of the biggest limitation there is in published accounts. And one of the other major limitations is the window dressing part. This entails the construction of financial documents organized to present a company's performance in the best possible light. So companies try to window dress their documents, try to present themselves as having a good liquidity and profitability position, even if they do not have that. Okay, the consequences of window dressing will probably be impaired figures for liquidity and profitability, making the business appear more attractive to diverse stakeholders such as shareholders, banks, and suppliers. So we've talked about that as well, window dressing, when we're talking about ratio analysis. So if a business wants to improve its liquidity, so they just sell off their asset just before the date of when the statement of financial position is taken. Just before that, they sell their asset, and after the statement of financial position has been recorded, they lease that back. So because of that, the liquidity position, the liquidity ratios will be good. But again, that is not the current situation because they just sold off their asset at that particular time. Perhaps they were not too much good in maintaining the liquidity throughout the year, but just because they sell off their asset at that last moment, their liquidity is shown to be better. And same thing can go for profitability as well. They can just include sales of next year's into current year as well to show that okay, the profitability has increased, but that would instead cause some effect. It will have some negative effect on the future revenues and profitability of that particular period, of the next accounting period. So that's all about window dressing. There are of course many methods a business can use to window dress. The basic idea is that they want to show that the liquidity profitability is good, which may not be the case, and hence provide a an incomplete or inaccurate picture of the business performance. Another limitation is that many items are left to the personal judgment of the accountant. That is stock valuation, bad debts provision, depreciation. All of this the accountant has to judge themselves. And this is not one of the most important points, but this is still one of the points, so that's why we have discussed that. It reflects only on quantitative transactions. Qualitative factors are left out, such as reputation, the loyalty of employees, the integrity of management, CSR policy, etc. So, along with your window dressing and your historical point, this is the third most important point of your third most important limitation of published accounts, that it does not reflect on the qualitative factors. It only shows the quantitative factors. So these are some of the qualitative factors that the published accounts does not show. Something like leadership. Okay, that it does not tell you about the quality of leadership of the business, uh, and stakeholders won't know the type of leadership, or if the leaders are skilled enough to motivate employees and lead the business towards success. They can't tell what sort of leadership does the business have, and it is quite an important qualitative information to decide whether the business is worth investing in or not, or for other employees that might be seeking to you know have some that are looking forward to become a part of that particular business. They should know what is the type of leadership in that particular business before they apply for jobs, etc. The business's market standing is also one of the important factors, that even if the business has products which are making quite a profit, which will be shown in your published accounts, the published accounts will not show if the business is developing any new products or entering new markets, which could guarantee future success, as the data is historical. So since the data is historical, you don't know if this information is provided or not. They only provide quantitative data or qualitative data, such as like if what is the current situation of that business in the market. Is the market growing and the business not making any new products? Is the business developing any new products according to the growing market? Is the business entering new markets? Is it exploiting something or not? Is it being profitable enough or not? It may be profitable now, but will it continue to retain that profitability later on because of the ever-changing dynamics of the business market? So that information is also not shown in quantitative data. Business's workforce. So published accounts will not reveal the productivity levels or the levels of labor turnover, which can perhaps indicate the morale within the business. So it won't tell you the motivation of employees, if the employees are motivated enough or not, what is the labor turnover of the business, what is the absenteeism rate. Okay, it won't tell you that. So that is also one of the important factors, qualitative factors, which is not shown in the published accounts. So we've talked about the limitations. Okay, historic information, not all information is shown, window dressing, and qualitative data not shown. So what is the evaluation? Is this sometimes the examiner asks if, or because of all these limitations, is published accounts useful enough for stakeholders or not? Do these limitations completely negate the usefulness of published accounts, or do they still have some use, or do they still have some value? So for that, I've written down this point over here, that published accounts are still valuable for internal and external stakeholders who seek business performance indications. However, these accounts must be supplemented by qualitative information to more effectively measure present business and potential future performance. So of course they are still valuable, but they need to be supplemented with some qualitative data to make better use of that data. There are important limitations of published accounts, which we have already discussed now, but they are still of significant value as they are required by law. Okay, published accounts are very are still important. Why? Because they are required by law. They provide reliable information and indicators for stakeholders. They aid in decision making, like whether to invest or not for shareholders, and they can also be used for performance appraisal, both inter-firm with competitors and intra-firm, that is with past performance comparisons. So all these comparisons can be made with published accounts as well. Yes, there are some limitations, but still they are not completely useless. They are still useful, and they still have some level of accuracy in them. So one last thing before we finish off this chapter, that's financial versus non-financial indicators. So we just talked about that the published accounts are only quantitative data. They do not show the qualitative aspects of the data. So why is it that financial measures are important? Why is it that non-financial indicators are not important? Why is it that non-financial indicators are also necessary? So financial measures could indicate the following. Okay, could include the following. What is it? Your cash flow, your break-even analysis, cash flow forecast, cash flow statements, liquidity, which is found using current ratio, and asset test ratio, that is your quick ratio, and profitability, that is your gross profit margin, and net or operating profit margin. This data can be found in the income statement and the statement of financial position. So in all of these data statements, we have all this data. We can calculate all this data as well. So this data can be used for performance appraisal and aids in decision making. So that's of course how useful your financial data is, but still there are some limitations to these financial indicators of performance. What are these? That they can be historic and manipulated into addressing. So these are just the limitations of the published accounts, because of course financial data is included in published accounts, and it misses out on other qualitative drivers such as innovation, quality, employee relations, intangible assets, etc. So that's why non-financial indicators are important. Why? Non-financial factors such as customer loyalty, brand value, intellectual capital, etc., may well point to a significant part of the value of a business and play a vital role in business success. Financial measures do not take these factors into account. Okay, they do not look at the brand value. They do not look at the customer loyalty. They do not look at intellectual capital. Okay, some business might not have good enough. They might not have good enough assets, etc. In a good overall current assets, etc., but they might be a business which has most of its which makes most of its sales because of the knowledge that its employees have, because of the intellectual capital. Perhaps it's a software business or a educational institute like your schools, your colleges, your universities. Okay, the major part is the motivation level of employees, their intellectual capital. Okay, all of that, brand value of the business as well. So all of these play important part, a vital part in the success of those particular business. So that's why we also need to look at the non-financial factors. So non-financial measures are more closely linked to the long-term strategy of a business. Okay, so of course brand value, intellectual capital, consumer loyalty, customer loyalty, they are all linked to the long-term success of the business. The progress made towards reducing competition and increasing consumer loyalty, that has. So when you talk the progress made towards reducing competition and increasing consumer loyalty is of course one part of their long-term strategy. That is what businesses want. They want to reduce their competition and increase their consumer loyalty, increase their brand recognition, so that you can have long-term profitability, not just short-term profitability. Traditional financial measures may place too much emphasis on short-term issues, focus on strategy rather than just tactics. Okay, you just don't want to focus on your short-term tactics. You want to focus on your strategy, your long-term strategy. What could be done? Because your traditional financial factors only they emphasis there is too much emphasis on short-term issues. Okay, if someone sees your financial measures only, they see, oh, this profitability is falling, so this is not worth investing in or not. But it might be perhaps because of their CSR policy, because of the the benefits that they offer to their customers, to their employees, because of which they entail a lot of cost, but in the long run they will be profitable because of the improved productivity of the employees, because of the improved brand recognition that they will have, because of the improved consumer loyalty of the customers that they will have. So all of that will contribute towards the success of the business in the long run. So that's why we need to have non-financial data as well. Financial data alone cannot be of that much use, but it is still useful. So with that's a wrap up for this chapter. Thanks for watching. In the next chapter, it's all about cash flow statement, and then you're all done with the syllabus. Thanks for watching. Allah.